I'm going to define a variable called myList, and I'll assign it a set of values. Now the syntax here is you need to use open and close square brackets. And inside of these square brackets, we specify the items that we want to put into the list. And so let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So now I can print the contents of this list like this. Let's hit run. And there we go. That's our list. I can also do a type. So I could use the type function. All right. Now type is not a method because it's not associated. We're not doing a dot on an object. We're just doing type, just like print. Print is a function. Type is a function. You've seen this. And so we're just doing a type on this to see what is the type for this particular data or this variable. And of course, when you run it, it's going to say list. So welcome to our next data type. It's a more advanced data type that provides a lot of functionality, and that is the list data type. So this is how you define a list. So now let's go over some of the things that you can do with lists. Let me get rid of this here. And I'm just going to print the list as is. Now, if I want to, for example, pop an item from the list, I could do myList.pop and pop out the last value of the list. By default, pop basically gets rid of or pops out the last value in the list. And so this is a mutable object. Remember in the previous lecture I told you that strings are immutable, meaning you can't change them. Well, lists are mutable. You can change the contents of a list. Okay, so after this line executes, my list will no longer contain the last item, which is 5. Okay, because we are doing a pop. So this is a new method. All right, this is a method. So let's run this, and there we go. Notice my list now only contains 1, 2, 3, 4, and it got rid of the last element, which was 5. Now I can pop at a specific index position. So just like strings, these are zero-based index. So the first value is the 0th index position, second value is 1, 2, and so on. So if I want to get rid of the first value, if I want to pop out the first value, I could just use a 0 index position, and it will get rid of the first value from this list. And so when we run this, now we have only values from 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now beginners might think that we have to modify and then reassign this back to my list, but that's not necessary. This is no good. We don't need to do this. This is a mutable object, meaning it can be changed. Okay, so you don't have to assign it to anything else. You just do pop, and it gets rid of the last value. Now let's say if I want to change some item in this list, it's actually pretty straightforward. I could do my list at the 0th index position and assign it some value, and this could be even a string. So let's say I put an S in here, and so let's run. And now notice we modified the list object. Now the first item is now an S, and you can see the result down here. The first item is an S. So as you can see, lists can contain strings as well as numbers and other objects. A given list can contain multiple types of objects, and a list can also contain another list. So for example, if I was to change this to another list with the word hello and then goodbye, now this entire list is going to make its way into the 0th index position. One will be replaced by this entire list. So let's run, and there we go. Notice we got this new list in the first slot of this list, and we got the rest of the items. Now we talked about the pop method, and I also showed you how you can change an existing value in the list. There's also something called the append method. So I can actually do this. I can do myList.append and append a given value. So let's say I wanted to append the string, this is a sentence. Now this string will be a value that will be appended to the list. Okay, and you'll see when I run this, notice there you go. We got the first value, second value, and so on. And then the last value is this is a sentence. Now one thing I forgot to mention is that the pop method actually returns something. Okay, so if I was to, for example, do myList.pop and capture the return value, it's actually going to return the value that was popped out. And this is very handy, right? We don't want to just clear away items in our list without having an opportunity to capture them one way or the other. And so I can pop this last item in the list and save it into a variable called sentence or something. And so I can print my list, and then later I still have access to the sentence variable, the data that was the last item. We popped it out, we saved it in the sentence variable. I can always use that later in my program For example, in this case, I'm going to print the sentence. So let's hit run. So this line right here appends to the list this particular sentence, and then this pops it out and saves it into a sentence variable. And this variable, again, we're going over the basics here, but this could be anything. My value, for example, it doesn't really matter. And I can use that value anywhere in my program because once I pop it, I capture it in here. And so this is still going to be the modified list because we pop that data, and I can do whatever I want with the captured value. But the append doesn't actually return anything. So if I was to create a variable here called, appended, and try to print out appended, you'll notice that, let's run it, it prints none. Okay, and none is a specific kind of data type in Python. It's a reserved word. As a matter of fact, if I type in none with the capital N, notice the syntax highlighting makes it clear that this is a Python reserved word, and none is a specific kind of data type. So this returns basically, the append basically returns nothing. And we're assigning that nothing object to append, and we're printing out that, and that's why we see none. Now let me clear some of this up, and let's get rid of this line, and let's get rid of this line as well. And let's get rid of this. So we're appending. Now if I was to append an array here, not an array, and a list, this is often referred to as an array in other programming languages. If I was to append the values 10, 99, and 100, for example, these values would be appended to this list, but it would not be appended as an item. Each of these will not be an item in this list. It's basically going to append this entire list object inside of this myList object. Okay, so let's run this. And as you can see, these are the items from the original list, and then this entire list has been appended into the final index position. So if I do a mylist.pop now, then my list will no longer have this final item, which is that list. So let's hit run, and there we go. Notice it got popped out. We're back with the original list. Now there's some handy methods, just like pop and append, and one of them is very useful that you're going to be using a lot, and that's sort. If you want to sort the contents of this list. Now, at this point, this is already sorted from smallest to largest. If I hit run, notice it's not going to do anything. But if I was to change the order here, let's make this 5, and let's make this 1. Let's make the first value 4, and let's make this 2. Now this is unordered list. Using the sort method, it's actually going to modify, it's going to change the list object. And so when we print it, it will be in fact sorted. I'll prove it to you. Let's hit run, and there we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's sorted because we did the sort method. Now again, we don't have to capture this in a variable or anything. The sort method doesn't return anything. It modifies the actual object. This is it's a mutable object, meaning it can be changed. So it does an in-place sort. There's also something known as reverse. So instead of sort, I could do reverse right here. And now what this is going to do is going to switch the contents around in this list and make 2 be the first value, 1 be the second value, 3 be exactly where it is, 5 be the fourth value, and so on. You get the idea. So let's hit run. And there we go. 2, which was the last value, is now the first value. 1 was the second to last value, now it's the second value, and so on. So what you're going to find yourself doing often is doing things like mylist.sort. So we first bring this in sorted order, and then if we want to get it from largest to smallest, we can use the reverse. And so let's hit run. Now it's from largest to smallest. Now this doesn't have to be integers. Python has some intelligence built into it. So if I was to change this into strings, let me wrap a quote around each of these items. So these are no longer integers, these are strings. Python will still be smart enough to sort it. So let's hit run, and there we go, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It first sorted it, then reversed it, and that's why we get this order. Same thing with alphabets. So if I have a B, D, A, Z, X, let me just comment out this line again. We can put that hash symbol before it, and that line is no longer going to be interpreted by the Python interpreter. So only these lines, this line, and this line will run. So let's hit run, and there we go. It is in fact sorted A, B, D, X, Z. By the way, a shortcut on your keyboard, if you do a command / while selecting a given line, that comments it out and uncomments it. So my cursor is on this line. I do a command /, it comments it, bring my mouse back there, press command / again, and it uncomments it. So just a handy tip there. Now, just like strings, you can also slice lists. So for example, let's say if I wanted to get from A onwards, I could specify the index position. So this is the 0th index position, there's 1, and from 2 onwards. So I could do 2, colon, and this will get the end until the end of the string, until the end of the list. So let's hit run, and there we go. We get A, Z, X. Just these 3 values. If I want to get a part of the items, let's say I only want from A to Z, I would do 2, colon, 4, and that will give us these 2 items. So let's hit run, and there we go. We get A and Z. And why did I do 4 here is because the last value is non-inclusive. That's why we have to, instead of doing 2, colon, 3, we have to do 2, colon, 4 to go 1 over, and that's how it captures these 2 values. You can also use the negative integers for slicing. So if I do -1, it gives me the last value. Let's hit run, and there we go. We see the X, the last value. So you might be seeing how there are similarities between the way you slice strings as well as the way you slice lists. Now, there's one more function I want to introduce to you, and that is the len function, L-E-N. And that's to basically get the length of a list. So I could do len mylist and capture that value in item count variable or whatever. And then I can print out item count down here, and you'll see that it gives us the number of elements inside of the list. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements. Now, len also works on strings. I don't know if I covered this, but if I was to, for example, create a string here, sentence, and give it A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I can actually do a len on sentence, like that. And it'll give me the item count for sentence. So let's hit run, and there we go. We got 7 characters in this string sequence. So len is another function that you're going to be using a lot to count the number of elements in a string, as well as to count the number of elements in a list or some other collection data structure. Now, there's one last thing I want to talk about with regards to lists, and that is the process of merging 2 lists together. So let me clear some of this. As a matter of fact, I'll get rid of all of these lines. And so we have my list, and I'll create another list. And let's just give it some values. It doesn't really matter. We'll give it a couple of numbers. And if I wanted to print the contents of both of these lists, what I could do is I could do my list plus another list. Like that. And when I hit run, it'll print the contents of both of these lists, and it basically prints one big list that contains all of the items from the first list and all of the items from the second list. But nothing really got modified in any of these lists, okay? So if I was to print another list, it would still have the original contents, of course. And if I was to print my list, it's of course only going to have what my list has. But if I was to combine these together, I can create a new list, and we could do my list plus another list. And now new list is the thing that's going to contain all of the elements. So let's print new list. As you can see, it has all the elements. We merge the contents of both of the lists into this new list. Now, this is different than appending one list to another, right? Let me just quickly review that. If we do new list.append, and we append this another list, after this line runs, we've permanently changed the contents of my list, okay? Because now what's going to happen is my list is going to contain all of these elements plus this element, all right? This entire list will be the 6th element of the my list, all right? So let's print my list after this line, and you'll see, there we go. This entire list has been added as the sixth element of the original my list. Now, another list here, of course, still stays. I'm going over these basic principles because, especially if you're a beginner, I want you to be clear. So if we print the contents of another list, that's, of course, going to still have the 1 through 5 data, right? But my list has been changed forever at this point. If you hit run, notice. So practice with lists, merge lists together, do sorting, perform reverses, try to slice lists, and play around with them. Get a lot of practice because lists are very, very important data structures in Python.